to let you know that recording has begun. Before we dive into our topic for today, I would just like to give you a brief overview of Pillars. So I am going to share my screen and walk you through that ever so quickly. Most of you know us already. Our mission is to provide shelter support and solutions to address housing needs in our community. We look to do that in an innovative way and to keep experiences of homelessness rare and brief so that everyone has a place to call home. Values by which we do our work include respect, collaboration, empowerment, and grit. That's who we are as an organization. That's what we do every day. And that's what you do as partners to us in our work. So thank you. If you received our annual report this year, you may have seen this graphic. We call this Pillars at a Glance, and it gives you a sort of sweeping view of the many programs that fall under the Pillars umbrella, from homelessness prevention to street outreach to shelters, all the way to supportive and affordable housing, which you will hear more about today. This graphic is also available on our website if you're interested, so you can find it there, or you can contact me to request a copy of the annual report if you don't already have one. I would like to pause there and share a poll with you so that you can get a sense of who is in the room. So, Ayanda, would you launch the poll? It looks like I no longer have that capability. Are you able to do that? If you click polls at the bottom.
It's been launched.
Is anyone seeing it? I'm not.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, people are filling it out.
And when response is slow to a halt, Ayanda, you can feel free to go ahead and share the results.
Okay, it looks like we've got 22 of 24 have voted.
I haven't voted because I'm not seeing it, so I think we're pretty good.
And there, I've shared the results.
Would you, for my sake, narrate the results for me, since
Sure.
again, I'm not seeing them for some reason.
Sure, it looks like we've got 6 staff members. We've got some donors, as well as 5 community members, some 4 volunteers, 5 partner organizations, and a reporter.
Wonderful. That's a great mix. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. No matter how you're connected to us, no matter how you are sharing our story, we appreciate you doing so. And all of you do that in one way or another, I know. So thanks for that. And thanks for taking the time to be here. But you're not here to hear from me, you're here to hear from Joe about affordable housing. I'd like to introduce Joe Mauthe. He is our executive director here at Pillars. Prior to our merger in 2018, where we were formed from 3 housing organizations, Joe led one of those housing organizations, the Housing Partnership of the Fox Cities, as its executive director. And he did that for 5 or so years prior to 2018. And he's been leading us since then. Joe is going to present this morning on affordable housing, both Pillars programs and government programs, and give you a bit of context around affordable housing generally. He'll do that till about 8:10, and then we will open up for an extended, he will do that until 8:10 if I make him stop talking. And then we will open up for an extended Q&A. And you will have plenty of time to ask your questions. Feel free, though, as questions occur to you, to enter those questions in the chat, and our team will be watching for those questions, and we'll make sure that they get raised during the Q&A if you yourself would rather not voice them during the Q&A. So sit back, pour yourself another cup, and Joe, The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. Now I have to figure out how to start my presentation at the right spot. There we go. Okay. All right. The gauntlet has been thrown down. 8:10. Here we go. Thanks for being here, and what a great opportunity to talk about all the conversations over coffee are really nice for us because we get to drill down into one area. And as you know, as Lisa showed you this overview of pillars, right? It's pretty expansive. I'm going to steal her phrase, a sweeping view. And there is certainly a lot going on, and this gives you a sense of every one of the programs as we lay it out and what it takes for resources to do that and what the goals of those programs are. You know, and just as a reminder, so many times it's easy for us to talk about the left side of this continuum, our crisis housing side. This is our homelessness side of things, where we have 2 shelters and a daytime resource center and a team that goes out multiple times during the week connecting with people on the street. And it's dynamic and it's intuitive for us to see in the community and to address and to worry about. And that is important work. And sometimes that dwarfs a little bit of what we do. We've also, on Conversations Over Coffee, been able to talk about our supportive programs, where we can say, now what's the next step from an episode of homelessness, however that happened, and whether it's the first time or the 10th time, how can we move to the next level of stability, the next level of support, and the next level of independence. And that's our supportive housing programs, and tucked in that square, I think, are 8 different programs for different demographics, and our Ascend Young Adult program, which is really geared on housing and support everything there. But today we move over to the far side of this continuum, and we talk about affordable housing, and we'll talk about that market rate side of it a little bit. But this is about kind of, it doesn't always even internally get as much attention because it is by definition, and even the way we named it, it's more stable. We call this stable housing. So we move from crisis housing to supportive housing to stable housing. And hopefully that's the way it works, is that things stabilize and now we're on track, and it takes a little bit of time to get where you want to go. But make no mistake, in any of this, the thing that's in common is the value of home and what that means. What that means to an individual and what it means to a family and what it means to a community is the value of home. And on where we started on the beginning side of this continuum is the trauma and pain that comes from not having a place to call home. And as we move through, we get to all of the opportunity and hopefully the joy of having that. So I've got a question for you, not a poll question for you this morning. What's your home worth? That is a big question today. If anybody has been looking for a home in the market, hearing stories about how fast homes are selling, homes, I think right now the average in this area is selling for 3 to 5% above list price, with no contingencies. People are waiving inspections and waiving everything. So what's your home worth? And I did a quick check. I went to Zillow, and here's the quick answer. You can bring up a map, find everything that's for sale in town, and that's what your home is worth. Now that's dictated by a number of things, right? So what's its location? What's the supply and demand? Location, dollars per square foot, depending on the age and the amount of remodeling you've done, location, lumber prices. And if you've heard about that, and not everybody has, but check out this graph. That is what's happened to construction lumber prices over the last year. Tripled. So what's your home worth? I don't know. Everybody likes to go look and see, and what is it? But in our world, that's part of the question, but that's not really the question. We'll say, what's it really worth? What's your home really worth? Right? This feels like one of those old MasterCard commercials, right? You know, cost of lumber up 3 times what it was last year, cost of furnishings, all of buying on the right side of town, all that. But what's it really worth? You know, in this, I think, and especially if you're on this call, because you get it, because you've got a relationship with us and this kind of work, you know that it's the worth and what a home can deliver in value goes far beyond any price tag you could put on it as a whole or any piece of it. And I think one of the best things, and we've done this as a community, if you remember a couple of years ago, it was our community read, this book by Matthew Desmond called Evicted. And he went into mainly an eviction process, but more true, I guess, is what's happening in housing circles in our country. And there's a quote in there that I think is great, which really addresses the what's it really worth. And he says, it's hard to argue that housing is not a fundamental human need. Decent, affordable housing should be a basic right for everyone in this country. And the reason is simple, and it really does boil down to this. So for whatever, however you define home and what that's done for you, or what you might have wished it was done for you, without stable shelter, everything else falls apart. And that's our belief, and that's the world we play in, is if we can't put that fundamental shelter, and we're putting that in on a temporary basis on the left side of that chart we showed, we're trying to patch it up on a temporary basis, and we build to a permanent basis that once we have stable shelter in place, we know that good things happen, the good things can happen. And when that's not in place, the likelihood of everything working out gets to be smaller and smaller. So just to drive that point home, and this we stole a little bit from Theta Care and some of the work they're doing, is if you look at somebody's health, if you look at their life, if you look at their vitality, their ability to live fully as they're made to be, this was always bad news for healthcare organizations. Only 20% of somebody's health can be attributed to the quality of healthcare they receive. I'm going from the bottom up. 30% of their health are things they can control, like tobacco use, diet and exercise, and so on. And the top half of that are other things. Physical environment, like the place you live in, sleep in, work in. And then we get to everything on the top, your education, your job status, and all of those things. So your ability to live fully, where does home come? What's the value of home now? Well, this chart would say it's the top 50%, because if we don't have a solid, stable home in place, to say nothing of loving, supportive home in place, well, what is your ability to excel in your education, or for your children to excel in education? What about to be able to hold a job? If your housing costs are eating into your ability to keep your car in good repair and you can't make it to work, what does that do for your job? What about when your house isn't the adequate size or space or in the right place for your family and your ability to succeed at work and increase your income? So that's why we go to, at the fundamental, right? We are passionate about the value of home because we are passionate about the value of life and somebody's ability to fully engage in life. So one other thing on this, and it's I'll give you some stats as we go, and you can pick them apart in a couple of ways. But the studies done on people who experience homelessness, if you want to put a number on it, an experience of homelessness or experiences of homelessness will decrease your lifespan by 12 years. So that brings this chart to life. If I can't put those things on the top of the page into place, 12 years. Now, again, you could statistics, so we can argue that a lot of ways, but there is an impact, and that's what we're trying to do, is put that stability in place. So why does this happen? Well, just to show you, and I guess maybe sometimes we spend time convincing people that some of this stuff is real. So this is just over the last 15 years, what has happened to the cost of a one-bedroom apartment in the Fox Cities area. And it's all done on a percentage. So you don't have to worry about, is it $500 a month or $600 a month? We just equaled everything out and said, in 2007, 15 years ago, let's start the clock. And how have rental rates changed and throw a 2-bedroom on there. For the first couple of years, it matches. Some years it goes up, some years it goes down. But you can see right now, a 2-bedroom apartment in our area is 30% more expensive than it was 15 years ago. So let's compare that to what's happened to wages in that time. We'll go back and we'll calculate based on average family income, which is a common measure in a community. And that's the green line here. And what you can see is that might not be as stark as you think, or you might be surprised by it. But typically what we've seen over the last 15 years is, in the end, housing costs have outpaced wage growth by 5%. And if you dig into the chart, it's often outpaced it by 10% per year. So that's if you're just making it in your home, when your rent goes up, and as in that book Evicted, as Matthew Desmond says, rent eats first in a household, right? You pay your rent first, everything comes after that. Rent eats first. So there's just a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less to be able to do all of those other things we just talked about in terms of needing to live a full and healthy life. Now, this is probably worse. Again, I'd like to pick into this because that is average median income. And what we know is that average might be growing, but what's happening in our country and consequently in our community is that middle class is getting pulled to the edges. So what used to be 2/3 of a population was in quote middle class, that 2/3 is getting pulled both ways, some higher, some lower. Average tends to stay the same, but we see people that are struggling. So what does this mean then if you wanted to go look for an apartment? So there's a lot of things on this chart. So yesterday I went to apartments.com and said, I've got to find an apartment. I got to find something that is open now, or I'll give myself a month. I'll say what's out there in the next month that I can move into. And so let me just walk you down the statistics here. So a 1-bedroom FMR equals fair market rent. That's the government, the HUD, Housing and Urban Development group says that's fair market rent in this area is $619. So I looked at that and said, well, on apartments.com, there are between now and July 1st, 42 units available. They range from $530 to $1,700. And the average of those 42 units was $981. And then to do a little bit of math for you, which we'll come back to why this is important, that would mean that per the formula, if you were making $18.86 an hour in a full-time job, you could afford that apartment. And the same thing's then for a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom. And you can see there's 66 2-bedroom units available, and there's 9 3-bedroom units available. And the prices, there was, I think, 2 in a 1-bedroom here, 2 under fair market rent, and a lot above, obviously, to get the average up. So rent at this time in our community is pretty tight. There's not a lot out there, and that does a couple things. If you look at the overall vacancy unit, where we were at in 2012, going back to that previous chart, we were at about a 8% vacancy rate, and it becomes a little bit of a renter's market then to be able to find things. We're now at, I think the latest I saw is about a 2.5% vacancy rate. Really tight. And as a landlord, we'll talk about that. That's about the cost of turning over units once in a while and freshening them up. So it's really tight. And then as you go in, so not only is there not a lot to choose from, if there are a lot of people applying for that same apartment that you want, the competition gets pretty stiff. And if you got some things on your background that might cause somebody some concern, unsteady employment, incarceration, tickets, past eviction, it gets really hard to compete for these 42 units, and especially the ones in your price range. So what happens then? So let me give you another bit of jargon in our world, is housing burdened. So this is the measure we and the country uses. is, are you housing burdened? And here's what we would say. If you are spending more than 30% of your household income on your housing costs, you've got some burden. And go back to this chart that we had earlier. What's the burden? I might not be able to repair my car. I might not be able to have food on the table. I might not be able to maintain my job. I might not be able to have the money available for the medicine I need to treat some illnesses or chronic conditions that I have. So if you're paying more than 30% of your household income towards your housing costs, something's going to give, probably. That falls apart on the high end of the scale and the low end of the scale, but that is a general measure of risk. Again, going back to that eviction book, that's where Matthew Desmond called it grinding poverty, right? So I'm giving more, I'm giving a third or more of what I bring in to my housing costs, and then the rest becomes a little bit of a shell game of which bill do I pay to be able to get through the week. And it kind of grinds. So for us then, and you can see here, what do people pay? Well, about 10% of our renters in this area pay less than 50% of their income for rent, and 24% of renters will pay between 15 and 20%. When we get over here to the left side of the chart, we've got 39% of our renters. To quantify that in our community, that's about 3,800 households are in that housing burden and are struggling in some way, most likely, to make ends meet.
And Joe, just to clarify, you're talking specifically about Appleton. That doesn't include surrounding communities. Is that right? Am I understanding that right?
Yes, thanks, Lisa. That's a great clarification. So in most of these, when I'm sharing stats, I try to go where the statistics are the best. And when we get into Appleton, or Appleton as a city, or Appleton as a metropolitan area, it's very Appleton centric, but we know from looking at other things, if it's going to vary, it's going to vary slightly if you go to Calumet County or Winnebago County. So the numbers are directionally good, but we need to know that they're kind of limited because it's what's most available. Thank you. So that's the situation. So I wanted to paint the situation, for starters, of what is the value of home, what's happening in the community, and when we hear things, what's true about that, and how do we address it? And the how do we address it, it gets to be tricky. So let me show you, back to our chart here, let me show you how Pillars does this. What our affordable housing programming looks like. So to give you a picture first of what it looks like, these are some representative Pillars housing units, everything from a single family home up in the left to our Wireworks complex that our office is at here in Appleton. On the corner of Law and Hancock Street is a renovated factory with 25 apartments, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, and going clockwise around in the bottom right is a duplex. We have a number of duplexes because of the efficiency of those, and the bottom left is an Appleton apartment complex we have with 10 2-bedroom units. So all told, here's a little map of where our properties are, largely Appleton and Neenah. I'll talk about that in a minute. You can see, and we count things a little different depending on the program, but 134 housing units. We are grateful and proud for 134 housing units to address this issue. But if you were paying attention 2 slides ago, I said there is a need for 3,800 people who are housing burdened. So we also recognize the drop in the bucket that this is. And there are other things going on in town as well. So, and I'll just mention those a little bit. I mean, there are things you might hear about Section 8 vouchers or housing choice vouchers or VASH vouchers. All of those are is a voucher, is a certificate given through a housing authority that allows a renter to rent and pay the amount that they can, 30% of their income, and have the rest of that be covered largely through HUD to the landlord. There are also public housing agencies. There are private rentals that are designated for low-income families. When we did a study a couple of years ago, we pieced all of that together, and that number of almost 4,000 units, kind of with all of those supports in place, was cut in half, which is great news. And the sad news of that is that's still 2,000 units that our community is short. And you can have your opinion on how you fix that, either by increasing income or increasing affordable housing. And I would contend that the answer is both of those, because those are both healthy for a community and healthy for a family. So for us then, one way to look at it is, who do we serve? And this is on all of the things that I just mentioned about Section 8 vouchers and housing choice voucher and public housing and low income housing. It all gets to be targeted towards low income, and low income is defined as a percentage of the median income in the area. So in Appleton, again, we're about $86,000 is our average, our median income for a family of four. And then we break that down and we say, if you are less than 80% of that number, 69,000, you're low income. If you're, and a family of four, so this has got more detail to it. If you're less than 50% of that average, you're very low income. If you're less than 30% of that, you're extremely low income. And the chart on the left then shows, what does Pillars do? Where's our clientele? And we are, for what it's worth, managerially, we are always looking at this saying, well, who do we serve and what's our mission and how do we go about doing this? And you can see that we're using more than half of our units in that extremely low income. And there's a good reason for that. So there's a good reason for that, because not a lot of other people will. Because a lot of times with that, if you go back to where we started, a lot with that comes some of those blemishes and irregularities in somebody's past that might come with an eviction, or might come with a job history that's less than desirable. It might come with some criminal activity. And in that compressed market we talked about, it is easy for everybody to look at the 50 rental applications on your desk and pick the one that's going to probably give you the least headache as a landlord. And we run into a lot of people who spend a lot of time trying to find apartments and don't. And so we know that we need to be able to provide that service. And if I sound hesitant at that at all, it's not. It's only the only part of that is that the way this pie gets divided up determines how much rent we collect, and it determines how well we can operate, how solvent we can be as an organization. So the world pulls us to extremely low income, and we find a way to make that work, because we know that that's the need largely that we fulfill in this community. And others, so some of the new low income housing that's going up in town, which is wonderful, but that's going to focus on that low income category and the very low income category. And that's great, because housing, affordable housing for anybody in any place at any time, is a good thing. And our niche then is becoming more on that extremely and very low income categories. So what's the key to our success as we run a program like this? I broke it into, I think, 4 main points. Our first key to success is to stabilize a household. We call it stable housing for a reason. We know that when we can get a household, a family, or an individual in place, and we can stabilize that, other good things will happen. So we talk about housing first. We talk about wanting to put housing in place so other good things can happen. Our first move for a family is to get that stable foundation in place and then work towards the other things. So we don't have a lot of preconditions. We don't say, when you sober up, when you get a better job, when you've got more money in the bank, we say, we're going to give you a chance, come on in. Now that we got that in place, let's work towards the next steps. And that's across all of our programs. Set rent at an affordable level. We say we follow that marker of 30% of income goes to rent. Everybody needs some income to come in the program. You need some skin in the game, and you need to have your portion of that paid. And that is good, proper, and healthy for moving on. And we focus on the prevention part of this work, as well as this is the next step. And I'll come back to that maybe as we close. Another key to success for us is we focus on the end game. We think about what's the end game? What's the highest level of independence that we can have? And if we look at the people who are renting out those 134 units, some people, the very best thing that can happen is that they stay with us forever, because they might have a disability. They have disability insurance. That disability insurance is not enough to be able to pay fair market rent anywhere. Typically, nationally, disability insurance, you'd have to adjust your rent to about $280 to be able to make it work. And we know that is not possible in many cases. So for somebody, highest level of independence is living with us, and we can subsidize that, and you can do well. For others, it's we hope that at some point we shake hands, and well, we don't do that anymore. We wave and bump elbows and wish you well, and you go on, and you don't worry about Pillars anymore, and we don't worry about you. So a sliding rent does that. And we've been in that situation, which is great. When we charge 30% and somebody comes in and they might be paying $300 for rent, and then they start working and they get a job and they increase, and every year we look at it and we say, what's your income now? Oh, we're going to adjust your rent to $400. We're going to adjust your rent to $500 as you continue to progress in your own career and your own earning potential. And eventually somebody might come to us and say, well, what the heck is going on? I can get any apartment in town for this amount of rent. And we say, that is great. That's how we measure success. When the time is right, you go get that apartment, and then we'll use this one for the next person who's going to need a couple of years to build up that base and get to that level of independence. So the sliding rent really sets us up for easing into, because some of you heard about kind of benefits cliffs that are out there. If I earn a little bit more money and all of this support goes away, so we try to have a plan that kind of gradually gets you back into the free market. Another key for us is we maximize our resources. So we want to keep our units full so that we're using them for mission purposes. And when somebody leaves, we want to turn that unit over as efficiently as possible, because that is using our resources to serve the community, using your resources that you support us with to best serve the community. We've run typically high 90s on our occupancy rates. And the other key is to continue to grow our inventory. We've had longtime partnerships, especially with the city of Appleton and the city of Neenah. Over 30 some years, we have been adding new properties to our inventory, so that we've got up over 100 properties now, and often we'll partner with other landlords as well, just to be able to, again, continue our mission. Couple more slides here. I want to put one in on impact. So, and you can fill in the gaps here. The chart really says, what's the fair market rent in Outagamie County, left bar, in Winnebago County, and what's the average Pillars rent? So you can see the financial impact of that. And I want you to think about that from two perspectives. The first one is, what's the impact on the household? So for us, the savings of, if somebody stays with us and we apply that sliding scale rent to their wage, the average that we see there, and you can see by number of bedrooms, typically about $250 a month. So now go back to that chart I showed you about health. What could you as a mom or a dad do with $250 for your family? How far could you stretch that to put more meals on the table? To make sure that your car's in proper working order, to buy medicine that you know you need, but you maybe couldn't even kind of afford the deductible. That is a big boost for somebody. That's a big safety net that we give somebody. The flip side to that, there's an impact on us to provide that kind of differential. So for us, right, the annual amount of that is $400,000 of contribution, if you will, to the well-being and health of the families that we serve. That's why we have calls like this too, to make sure that you recognize the magnitude of this. And it adds up quickly at $250 a month times 100 some households we're serving and all of that. So, and this is why we're so grateful that the community gets this and supports it and provides this stability, because otherwise, if you're in a community that only has the left side of that scale and you're only in the shelter side of things, what's your next step and what's your plan? I'm going to skip this one. We do surveys to say, how is housing helping you? So what happens in all of this? Well, over the last 3 years, we looked at this and where have people gone? And you can see here, I put 55+% positive. People who've moved into their own home, they've lived with us, increased their income, saved their money, bought a home, moved to other rental housing in town, swapped out within Pillars to be able to make a step ahead while still getting some of the help and guidance and protection that we offer. And on the same side, there's 16 lease violations where, not everything is rosy and everything goes well. And if you get into other, some people pass away, some people just leave, and we're not quite sure what happened. But you can see here, there is movement, and that movement leads to further independence. So two more points. I'm getting close, Lisa. 2 more points. One is, how do we do this? And the best way is to go through our website, pillarsinc.org. How do you sign up for this? A lot of people say, where are the resources? How do I get on your wait list? We don't necessarily manage a wait list. We manage an interest list. If you go to services, you'll see one called stable housing, and then a form comes up. And what we do is say, if you are interested in affordable housing, give us your information, a little bit about yourself. And when something becomes available, we'll contact you. When something becomes available that is right for your family and the location that you want to be and when you're available. So we don't give this false hope of, well, I'm on the wait list and I'm number 16 on the wait list. And what does that mean? It didn't work. So what we do now is when something becomes available, we blast an email out and we'll find the right person for the property that we have. A quick story of somebody to make this personal. This is the hard part to present sometimes, because I'm showing you pictures of houses and that kind of thing. And so Sarah, real quick, I met Sarah at Christmas time of 2018, and I know that because it was Christmas time, because Corey Chisel put on a free concert at the Lawrence Chapel. And offered us as many tickets as we wanted to go to that show. And he provided a school bus, and we pulled up. My wife Jean and I pulled up at the Dalton Family Shelter with a school bus ready to take as many people as wanted to go to a Christmas concert. And there was one person standing in the lobby, and that was Sarah. And that's all. Nobody else was interested at that point. So the 3 of us got on a school bus. We drove down College Avenue, and we got off and we went and enjoyed a nice Christmas concert. And I didn't get to know Sarah well. It wasn't the appropriate time nor the place, but I've known her story as I hear it talked about throughout. 5 children, classic experiences of homelessness, some domestic violence involved, some difficulties in a marriage, time spent outside, living in a tent, trying to get by, some family that could help but couldn't help so much, especially with 5 children. Sarah came into our family shelter and started working with the case manager and stabilized there and got an opportunity to move into some of the supportive housing that we talked about. Moved into supportive housing with her family of 5 kids, all under 13 at the time. And built stability and got a job, moved from a part-time job to a full-time job, moved to a full-time job to a promotion, increased her earnings, stabilized her mental health, rebuilt her family relationships, rebuilt her relationship for parenting of her children, and got to the point where we said, we don't need that supportive housing anymore. Tried to get a rental property in town, but again, for all of those reasons I mentioned, it wasn't possible. Fortunately, Pillars has that continuum of services. So we moved Sarah into one of our affordable housing properties where she continues to thrive, continues to work on all of her personal goals, continues to excel in her work, and is getting more leadership responsibilities there, and is taking care of her family. And is putting all of those pieces in place, and still has the support that we can provide by some extra stability, being a friendly landlord that makes sure that that place is affordable for her and her family. And at some point, I am confident that she is going to move on, and we're going to bump elbows. And we were part of her story. We were part of a low point in a life that becomes a source of strength for somebody for anything they face down the road. So this is what we like. Happy families where we can support and help them thrive and provide services. This is the last thing, and I was nervous about showing you this because I like to show families like this, and I like to show you a family where we put a key in somebody's hand and everything. When I said, what is home really worth to you? And you had some good feelings and all of that. And sometimes this is what happens with this gift that you and we provide for somebody, because it's not magic. And a key to the front door is powerful, but it's not magic. And our hearts get broken because somebody doesn't thrive in a unit, and they don't take care of the unit, and they aren't a good neighbor to their neighbors, right? And we have to go, and they walk away. So this is an example of somebody who had a number of lease violations. We worked and worked and worked, couldn't do it, and said, well, this is not a no consequence kind of program. And ultimately it came to the end, and they just walked away, and this was what was left. And we clean it up, we clean it out, we clean it up, and we try again. And I show you that knowing that there's somebody on this call saying, what are you guys doing? You're throwing money away. You should be harder, and you should be able to control this more. But we know that that's not the case, and that's not the population that we always deal with. Fortunately, this is a minority, as you saw on the other chart. But I'm also kind of trusting that you're invested enough in this to know that this is the reality. And this is the kind of stuff that is hard financially, but more so it is hard emotionally on our team to be able to see this happen and not turn into what we want. But in the end, we're willing to live with this. We're willing to take this chance because of a story like Sarah's, because of a story of somebody who needed that chance and turned it into something. So the promise of opportunity and greater good and independence and a full life well lived, we're willing to deal with the hardship of a mess and cleaning things up and biting our lip and trying one more time, because right back to where we started, without stable shelter, everything else falls apart. Well, I didn't quite do it, Lisa, but I'll turn it back to you to do whatever you can to get us back on time.
You answered a lot of questions proactively, I'm sure. Thank you very much, Joe. That was enlightening for me, so I hope that it was enlightening for everybody else as well. I have a couple of questions that folks submitted in advance that are not specific to what you presented. So I want to give those present a chance to ask questions they might have that are specific to what they saw this morning. And then I'll get to a couple of questions, one about involving parishioners and one about homeless encampments in a minute. So those questions are coming. Any questions about what you saw this morning? Feel free to unmute.
Are other organizations providing housing within their, for example, Harbor House? Do they have their own temporary housing that they put people in?
That's a great question, Cindy. So other agencies do participate in this, fortunately, because as you saw, it's a lot to go alone. Harbor House manages not only their services or counseling programs and outreach and connection, and their shelter for people fleeing domestic violence. They've partnered with us. We partner together. They're on site at Harbor House with 6 apartments that they own, we manage, and we provide case management to help with that supportive housing. Other agencies, Salvation Army has a housing program, AdvoCap has housing programs. There are some independent landlords and developers who provide affordable housing, less on the case management side. COTS is certainly a big player in the community on that, providing kind of their transitional living program, as well as some next step out. They have a manor house as well as some scattered site properties to provide this as well. It's never enough, but we're all part of the Fox Cities Housing Coalition, which works on this issue with our local government agencies as well, to continue to try and provide the most needed services.
Before we move to a next question, I feel compelled to take a minute to explain Cindy's name on her square. Cindy, who just asked the question, the E2F pans. Cindy leads and coordinates a program that provides empty to full aluminum pans of food that provide dinners at our shelter when volunteers are unavailable to make food for our clients. So, Cindy, how many pans a year through churches and other organizations?
It was at 800, but it's through 4 different groups of people too. So I'm supported in the community tremendously by people who really care. So makes it easier.
We've got an E2F meal coming up this week at one of our shelters. So thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions about the content from this morning before we move to those pre-submitted ones?
Joe and Lisa, this is Dan Vegan. You guys have an ability to track what is the demand beyond the 134 of the units that we've got available, and then the multiple other units like Harbor House. What's the demand out there? How much of a shortfall is there in affordable housing in all of these different categories?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. The best guess we have, and we pull this out of we did as a community a survey 5 years ago as part of Project Rush, for those of you who know that. Right. And we looked at what is the number of households and the income per households, and we compared that to the going rental rates. That's where we came up with a shortfall of 4,000, with about half of that covered through subsidized housing programs. So our best number on that, and I was just kind of refreshing myself yesterday on that as well, through the American Census survey through some bureau, and that number came up again, is almost 4,000 shortage in the community.
Okay. I also, if I could have a follow-up, I know you've had some conversations with some churches in the area that have shown an interest in supporting your efforts. And I think I missed a meeting last week on that matter, but I had a conflict. Do you know where that stands and how we're going to try and move forward with that? Maybe Lisa's the better answer for that one.
Still in conversation, in the forming stage of that conversation. So coming to agreement and understanding on what these groups want to accomplish together. So that's something that Pillars is certainly happy to entertain and support as we can.
Thank you.
We have a question submitted in the chat, which is that this participant is hearing from a lot of people who are living in local motels and hotels. Are these folks on the radar, and does Pillars assist with their cost of hotel living? Joe, can you field that one?
It's, I don't know that we fully know, and that's the hard part. One of the things we talk about is hidden homelessness, and how do you find it? Now, we do have a street outreach team, and that street outreach team is doing things that you would imagine, which is checking parking lots and under bridges, and also things that you might not, and going through parks. But they'll also go to where are there free lunch or breakfast programs to see who's there and connect with them, and find out what the story is and offer services. What happens for a lot of people is, staying in shelter is not easy for everybody. And people will bounce in and out, or will use, if they have any kind of monthly income, will at times use that to get a little bit of a change of place, moving out of shelter. So I don't think we have a great sense of that. And we know that there's a fair amount of kind of in and out of motel renting, and that typically doesn't go well, because that's to the tune of typically $1,000 to $1,200 a month to rent a hotel room. And you look at that and say, well, you could find an apartment. But again, and part of the issue is in this competitive rental market we have, there's some other things going on with those households that causes a landlord to not necessarily want to take a chance. And then you end up bouncing around, and that bouncing around is episodes of unsheltered homelessness, sheltered homelessness, and motel stays.
Thanks, Joe. One of the questions that we got in advance was how folks might involve parishioners, members of faith communities. Are there service Sunday projects, etc.? If Tony is with us, and Tony, how do faith communities get involved volunteering and supporting Pillars?
Yeah, so there's plenty of opportunities for faith communities, any kind of groups. The best way to get involved, reach out to me. Let me know, and let me know if you have any interest that you are hoping to get done, anything you're hoping to accomplish, or I can certainly talk to you about opportunities as well. We feed 135 individuals every night through dinner service, and have that same opportunity in the morning for breakfast service as well. So that's a great way to make a direct impact and a pretty immediate impact on the folks that are staying with us, and kind of helping them get through just that night or the rest of their day ahead of them. So it's a pretty easy process to get you set up and going. Just let me know. You can find me. I think Lisa put my information in the chat. Reach out to me via email or phone, and we can certainly talk more, and hopefully get you and some of the folks that you're involved with Pillars.
And as Dan, our group participant, alluded to earlier, some faith communities want to go deeper, and then we can certainly have conversations about ways that faith communities might invest in affordable housing, might get more involved. So we start with Tony, and that's the right place to begin. We had one other question submitted in advance, and that was about news stories that we've seen about homeless encampments in Seattle and Portland, places like that. Is this type of homelessness moving toward the Midwest? The understanding that this participant had was that this relates to drug addiction in some way, these encampments. So Joe, could you comment on that?
I can. I don't know that it's moving here, and that it's that folks are traveling here, but is that happening here? We haven't had encampments, but I mentioned our street outreach team, and we haven't seen a dramatic increase in the number. And if we want to quantify that, I would say, if I had a guess right now, how many people are unsheltered in town, it would probably be 15 to 20 of people that we run into when we're out and connect with people again, and under the bridge, living in your car, staying in a parking ramp, sleeping in a city park. I would say of that, I'm guessing now 90%, right, will offer services, offer shelter services as a way of getting in and getting cared for and moving ahead. And a lot of folks opt out of that for a variety of reasons, some of it being mental health issues, some of it being addiction, and some of it at this time of year, it's easier to be outside. That changes certainly come January and February, where we're doing the same work and trying to find additional spots for people. So there you can see part of the reason I wanted to show some of those stats up front was there are some pretty big systemic pieces of this that are going on that don't make it an easy problem to solve, and nor a quick problem to solve. And when you look at wage stagnation and inflation in all other parts of life, that we know that doesn't end well, right? When you've got 4 out of every 10 households who are struggling to make ends meet by one measure of kind of percentage of income, that one doesn't easily fix itself. The good news is the economy is stronger. In the country, there are 8.1 million jobs unfilled right now. So there is opportunity for all that. You need to have the right skill set in the right place. And you have to have in many cases, the personal capacity to be able to do that. So there's hope, I think, in all of that in a stronger economy. But it doesn't change overnight, and it doesn't change on its own. And the last thing I'll maybe say on that is that 39% is a big number, and that's a risk factor. I'm going to say this as I don't want to come out wrong. The number of people who end up experiencing homelessness, we have to remember, is less than 1% of our community. I think our latest number was about maybe 0.5% of our community in a year will experience homelessness in a Pillars environment. So that's pretty rare, but it also tells you that by the time you get to that point, a lot of things in your personal social safety net have probably fallen apart, that are holding the other 39% of those folks together. So when it gets to that point, we know that it's pretty serious, and that takes a fairly long road back to be able to call that a past chapter in your own life story.
Thanks, Joe. And thanks to all of you for being with us this morning. I want to be respectful of your time. We are just a minute past 8:30. If you would like more of this, August 5th will be our next Conversations Over Coffee. We will have a registration form up soon. It's not up yet, but it will be up soon. You can also follow us on social media. That's where you will read more about events like this and other things that are coming up, including a tour. We will be resuming Pillars tours on July 1st. So go to our website, pillarsinc.org, for more information about that tour on July 1st. We're limiting it to 6, given COVID restrictions. It's going to be a small group of 6 folks. So if you want to register, you'll find information about who to email to sign up for that. And lastly, I want to tell you about a really great opportunity we have going on right now. It's our Independence Day match. If you felt inspired by anything that you heard today, or you know someone who might be inspired by what you heard today, please tell them about a matching opportunity we have going on right now, June 1st through July 4th. We have an anonymous couple who are willing to give up to $50,000 to match gifts to Pillars to support our work. pillarsinc.org/donate is where you can give online. It'll be a 1-to-1 match for all donors, a 2-to-1 match if you happen to have given one time and one time only during COVID, so March through April or so of this year. So if you qualify for that 2-to-1 match, you will have heard from us about that by mail. And otherwise, 1-to-1 match for everybody. So let folks know that this is a great time to give to Pillars if you're so inclined. And if anyone wants to stick around for the meeting after the meeting, you're welcome to. If you have to go, please feel free to excuse yourself and leave the meeting. And we just want to say thank you one more time for joining us this morning. It was great to have such a good group.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Cindy.